Hi, my name is Barbara, and welcome back to another episode of Can I Recreate It in Elementor, a new series on this channel where I look at interesting websites with cool design elements and see if I can recreate those elements using the Elementor page builder. If you missed the first episode, I recreated an awesome custom-coded menu system using Elementor, so if you're interested in learning about how I did that, be sure to check that video out and make sure you're subscribed to the channel because we post new videos here every week and we would love to have you here. This week, we're taking a look at the website for one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Jenna Kutcher. If you're not familiar with Jenna, she is an Instagram and marketing expert. She has over 900,000 Instagram followers and a very successful podcast called Goal Digger. In my opinion, Goal Digger is one of the best podcasts for small business advice and marketing tips, so I'm going to put a link to all of Jenna's stuff down below so you can check her out. I think Jenna's website is really well designed. One thing that I really like about her website is this section with overlapping elements on the homepage. It's a really cool way to display this information, and it's not your typical grid layout where everything lines up, but it still looks really nice and balanced. I know that Jenna's website is built using the Showit platform. She's mentioned it on her website and a few times on her podcast. Showit gives you more freedom with your layouts because you can basically put elements wherever you want. I've played around with Showit, and while I think it's a really brilliant tool for designing websites, there are a few reasons why we don't use it at Wikidesign. I actually made a video on this a while back as to why we don't use Showit, so if you're interested in learning about that, you can search our YouTube channel for how much does a website cost in 2021, and it will link you to the video. I can also put a link in the description below and you can click that to view it. Despite this being a pretty complicated layout with a lot of different moving parts, I still think that we're able to recreate this in Elementor. So let's dig deeper into this site and give it a go. Before we get started, I will be using Elementor Pro for this tutorial, so if you have the free version, many of the elements that you see me using are not included. I'm also going to be using our own images and colors for this tutorial, so let's get started. Let's take a closer look at these different elements so we can get a better idea of how we need to structure it in Elementor. So right off the bat, I know that this is a 2-column section. So we put a column on the left and then a column on the right. And then underneath, if we scroll down, I'll also make 2 columns for this here because I feel like this is a column and then this is a column. Going back up to the top, we have a lot of overlapping elements, probably some negative margins and absolute positioning. I'm guessing that we could do a negative margin on this image to make the number here overlap. But for the script font, I think we might have to do some absolute positioning for that just because of the way it is laid out. And it's also on an angle, so I think we're going to have to use some CSS to rotate that in order to get that angle that we have going on. This button here, if I inspect the page, is an SVG. We can see that right here. I can just create a similar button that we can use as an image widget, and then we'll just link to the page that way. There's no rollover state on this, so it should be pretty easy to do that. Now, going back up to the top, let's check out these fonts. So this font is called Chronicle. I don't have that font installed on my machine, so I'm just going to use a serif font that's similar. The same goes for this script font. I thought that this originally was actually a SVG graphic of Jenna's handwriting, but it's actually a font called California Palms, another one that I don't have. So I'm just going to use a script font that I do have so it has a similar look. So the nice thing about these two sections is that they're designed exactly the same. So once I get one, I can duplicate it and just drag it over to the right hand side. In order to get this staggered look, they added this heading up here. So I'll just add the heading and maybe do some padding or a margin to stagger it a bit more, but that shouldn't be too hard to do. Now on the bottom, we have a slightly different layout, but again, I don't think it's going to be too difficult. We'll probably do some negative margins or absolute positioning in order to get all of these elements to overlap. What is going to be a challenge with this site is the mobile layout for sure. So let's go back to inspect and turn on the mobile setting so we can look at that. I'm just going to dock everything to the side so we can see the section better. So the way that this works is probably not the way that I would necessarily design this because it's not consistent. We have this image over here. This is pretty much the same as what we see on the desktop version. But then this one down below, we have the number on the right and then this script on the left, and then the image is going all the way to the edge. So it is a little bit different, but we're going to keep it the same, or at least try to keep it the same as what we have here. So this is going to be a bit of a challenge because we have to position the elements on the other side for mobile, but we can do that with Elementor, so I think we'll be all right. And then scrolling down to the bottom, this goes full width, and again, the script and the button are kind of flip-flopped. The button goes on the left and the script goes on the right, so we're going to have to position these in different ways on mobile. One thing too we might have to change is this up here, because if we go back to our desktop version, you can see that this is in the right hand column. So when it stacks, this is actually going to go underneath here. In the mobile version, it obviously goes at the top. So what we might have to do is create a new version of this heading just for mobile and then do some showing and hiding. I don't generally like to do that, but I don't really know another way to do it. So I think we're going to have to do some show hides in Elementor in order to get it to work the way that it is here. But it's definitely something that I think we can achieve. It's going to be a little bit of work, but we'll be able to do it, I think. Now that I've taken a look at Jenna's site, I have a good idea of how I want to start designing this. So I have a page opened up in Elementor on my testing server, and I'm just going to start by creating a 2-column section. Now from here, I do want to add intersections to both the left and right columns. I'm going to just have it be 1 column. I think this will be easier to duplicate. If everything's contained in one intersection, I can just copy that whole section and paste it in there. And I think it will be easier if we do some absolute positioning to have it this way. So I've added an intersection to the left-hand column, and then I'm just going to click in that intersection and drag over an image. I'm going to upload an image. We'll change that to full, and then I'm going to align it to the left. Now I'm going to go back to my widgets and I'm going to drag over a heading. This will be for the number. So I'm just going to call this 01 and we're going to style that up. So I'm just going to make this kind of like a darker gray color, and we will change the font. I'm just going to put in Georgia because I don't have the Chronicle font that Jenna used. And I'm just going to make this a bit bigger. Okay, so now we have the number and we have the image. I'm going to go back to my widgets and I'm going to drag over another heading. And this will be for the script font. So we'll add in our text. And again, we'll style this up. I'm just using this font called High Summit that I actually uploaded into the Elementor custom fonts just because it was the closest font that I had to the script that Jenna uses. So now we have 3 elements and we have to position these. So the first thing that I want to do is go to this script and click Advanced. And for positioning, we're going to do inline positioning, and then we're going to position this absolute. we'll just drag it over to this area here. I think we're going to have to do a little more styling just so it doesn't overlap. So let's go back to the style tab and add some line height. That looks a little bit better. Now remember, if we go back to Jenna's website, this is on an angle. So we have to rotate it a little bit, and there's no way to do that in the Elementor style tab or the advanced tab, so we're going to have to use some custom CSS. I made a whole video on how to rotate text. I can link to that video if you want to get the code. I did a vertical text, so rotating it 90 degrees. For this example, we're going to use the same code, but it's just going to be slightly rotated. So I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to give this a class of rotate, and then under custom CSS, we're going to add in the rotation. And I think we'll just be good with like a -10. And maybe even a little bit less. Let's do -8 because it's only slightly tilted. I think that's pretty good. All right, so now we're getting somewhere. We just need to add a negative margin to this image in order for this to overlap. So let's go to the advanced tab on the image, add a negative margin to this. All right, so we have to change the Z index on our number in order for that to show up. So things are looking pretty good. I would say we probably need to move this up a touch now because we did add the negative margin, but so far so good. Let's go back to Jenna's website, and yeah, I think we're pretty close. Might need to add some padding over on this number just to get, let's do 20. Get it to look a little bit more like what she has, but not too shabby. Now we need to add our circle button with the arrow. So like I said before, we're going to use an image to do that. So I created an image already, and I'm just going to drag over an image widget, and then we're going to insert that image in here. I have to style it up so that it's not so big. I think we're just gonna do like 80, and we will do a negative margin on that as well. I think that looks pretty good, and then we'll just add some left margin in order to get it into the corner. So that looks pretty good so far. Now we need to add our heading and then our title that we have here. So let's go back to our widgets, drag over a heading, add our text, and then we can style that up as well. So I actually have the font that was used for this. It's called Oswald. So I'm just going to type that in here, and we'll change this to like 300, change the transform to uppercase, and we'll change the size because it's pretty small, and letter spacing. So let's take a look. Hers is actually smaller, so let's make that about 16. Maybe make this 2.5. And let's actually make this letter spacing like 3. Okay, so I added another heading widget and I added our title. We just have to style that up. We'll use Georgia for this. And I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller just because hers is kind of small. I'll make this 24 to kind of match what she has. So far so good. I need to add a link to this button. So let's go back and do that. We'll just put in the pound sign just to make that a link. And then we'll add links to these as well. So let's go to the content on that and on that one. We also have to add a link to our image. Before I forget, let's do that. Okay, so now everything is turned into a link that should be a link. The image, the button, this free download, and the title. Let's go back to Jenna's website. So on Jenna's website, this is actually 2 lines. It's not going all the way to the edge. So I need to add some padding to the right-hand side in order to get this to be 2 lines. So let me go back to this and just add some padding to the right-hand side. So now that's on 2 lines, and we'll have to just adjust the line height a bit so it's not on top of each other. Okay. So I think that looks pretty similar to what Jenna has on her website. So from here, what I can do is copy this entire thing and then paste it in here. Before I do that, let's add the heading that she has right here to that column. So I can actually just copy this entire thing, go in here and hit paste, and I'll just change out the text. Now I'm just going to copy this entire section and then go into this column and hit paste. And from here I can just change out the image and the text. So pretty nice. What I just realized I did was I actually have this outside of the intersection. So let me drag this into our intersection, which is up here, to make sure that everything lines up the way it should. I need to drag this button there. So that's better. Sometimes you don't realize that you don't have things in the intersection, but you can easily drag and drop it in there. So that's what we'll do. And I'm just going to copy and paste these elements in here so I can change them out and just make sure that this image is above this. Okay. So now I can change out these, and I can also add some padding to this at the top to give it more of that staggered look. So let me do that. Start with 100. Let's go back to Jenna's website. I don't think it's quite that much. Let me just do like 70. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I went and changed out the images and text on this column that I duplicated, and I made some tweaks to both columns in terms of design just to get things to look a little more like what was on Jenna Kutcher's website. Now it's time to add the section underneath. So I'm going to go down here and add a 2-column section. On the left-hand side, I'm going to add an image widget. Insert my image here. We'll change that to full. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to add my free download text and the title. So I'm just going to copy and paste both of these things into the column, and then I'll just change out this text. I have to make some styling edits in order to get this to look more like Jenna's website. So I'm just going to add some padding around the entire column. So that's 160 pixels worth of padding. It is on 3 lines now, but I think we need to adjust it so that the top and the bottom are more in line with what she has. So I'm just going to adjust that slightly. And I think that looks a bit better. Now we need to add our number 3, our script font, and then the button. So going back to Jenna's site, it kind of all is in line on desktop. So let's just go and copy this so we have all the styling and everything, and then we'll paste that in here and we'll just drag it up. And let's do the same for the script. And the same for our button. I do like copying and pasting elements just because we have all the styling set and everything. Even though we have to make some adjustments in terms of where it's placed, it is a little bit easier to have like all the font sizes right and the colors and everything the same. So I like to use the copy and paste feature a lot in Elementor. So now that we have all the overlapping elements in here, the last thing that we need to do is just style these things. So I'm going to do that and I'll be back. 3 sections. I changed out the images and the text, added the styling, and I think that this is looking pretty good on desktop. On tablet and mobile, that's another story. And this is where things get a lot more complicated. If we pull up our responsive tools, I already started on some of the styling, but we still have a long way to go. You can see that there are some changes that we need to make on tablet, and then on mobile, it kind of totally falls apart. So I have a lot of work to do in terms of styling this to get it to look like Jenna's website. But I wanted to bring up something, because what you see in Elementor is not always the same as what you see on your phone. This is something I tell clients all the time, that it gets close, but it's not always 100%. And this is because there's a lot of different screen sizes out there. Elementor by default, when you hit mobile, it will default to 360 pixels wide, which is the most common screen size that people are using around the world. I can put a link to more information about this in the description, but that's the most common screen size. If I go on my iPhone, which is pretty new, it's a lot wider than that. So what I'm seeing on my iPhone, if I just pull this up on my phone right now, is not the same at all. If I go to Jenna's website and shrink down the page and go back to this section, this is way wider than 360 pixels wide as well. So this isn't the best way to get an accurate representation of what you have to do. What you're going to want to do instead, let's just make this full screen again. You're going to want to hit inspect and then click this button here, this mobile responsive button. And from here you can add in the dimensions of the screen. So I put in 360 width. So that's more of an accurate representation of what it's going to look like in Elementor and what it looks like on the most common screen sizes. I'm going to base the mobile layout off of what it looks like here, because that's how I'm going to make sure that it works on the smaller screens and things that are larger. So definitely use this tool within Chrome if you want to get a more accurate representation of what things look like. Another cool thing about this tool, you can select some different phones. So if you have like the iPhone 10, it will increase the size. There's a bunch of different dimensions in here. There's not a ton. They haven't updated this in a while. So there's not the newer phones, but if you do have an older phone or you want to do some testing with the older devices, this is kind of a cool way to do it. But yeah, we have to style things up and get it looking good on mobile, which will be a little bit of a challenge because things are not organized the same way on mobile as they are on desktop, but it's nothing that we can't do. The first thing that we're going to need to do is, like I said before, hide this on mobile and then create a section above number 1 that has the same thing, and then hide that one on desktop, just because there's no way of getting this up there without doing that. I don't generally like to do things like that, but I think that's the best option. So in order to do that, we're just going to go to Advanced, go to Responsive, we'll hit Hide on Mobile, and then above number 1, we'll add a new section with this. I'll probably have to go to the navigator to do that, just because I can't click on this section really well, which is another reason why I love the navigator. So I'm going to hit plus 1 column section, and then I can actually just copy and paste that in there, and then we'll just make sure that this is showing on mobile and hidden on desktop. So I'm just going to center this text because it was centered on Jenna's website. So that takes care of that. Now we just have to make some adjustments to these different sections in order to get things lined up the right way. What's really cool is that this is pretty easy to do in Elementor because they have different settings for different sizes. So we can do things just on mobile and the desktop version won't be affected. ahead and styled everything up on mobile and tablet. It was a lot of trial and error and repositioning things, so definitely glad I sped that up so you didn't have to sit and painstakingly watch me do that. But I think it's looking pretty good. This is what it looks like on mobile devices now and what it looks like on tablet. So much better than it did before. A couple things to note. I think just because the font is different, I wasn't able to get this to 2 lines. If you look on Jenna's website, this is 2 lines, but the font is a little bit different, so we're just gonna go with the 3 lines here just to get everything to fit. You definitely want to make sure that there isn't any overlap on these columns. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. If I position this a little bit more to the right, you can see what happens is there's a scroll bar that happens at the bottom, and you don't want that. You don't want the scroll to ever happen. So you want to make sure that everything is within the area that you have to work with. So now there isn't a scroll bar anymore, so I think we're in a good position. But with absolute positioning, this is definitely something that you have to worry about, because you'll get things that are just overlapping a little bit, and then you have that scroll bar, and it's kind of annoying when you're on your phone and it's scrolling both up and down and left to right. Let's take a look at what it looks like on tablet again. And again, there's none of that scrolling happening. Everything is within line of the column and the area that we have to work with. So I think we're doing pretty good. Probably gonna make a couple final tweaks to this, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So friends, that is it for today's video. Did I recreate it in Elementor? Yes, I did. And I'm not gonna lie, this was very challenging and kind of a pain. I don't really want to mess with overlapping elements like this in Elementor too much in the future. I don't think it's really worth it. But we did manage to recreate it, and I think it did turn out really nicely, so I'm happy that I did it, and I definitely learned something, and hopefully you did too. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell notification so you get notified whenever we upload new videos like this one. We'll see you next time.